Hi, welcome to the Tee to Green podcast. I'm PGA professional Jeff Mietus, and this is a new series of podcasts where we're going to bring on experts and the best in their fields in Western New York and have them discuss certain topics about the golf swing with a little bit of a deeper dive. Today, we got one of the best young players in Western New York and a great teacher in Tim Faulkner. He's a PGA professional from Crag Golf Club, and I've known Tim a long time, and anybody that's played with Tim knows he is an extremely proficient driver of the golf ball. He hits it long and straight. So we're going to pick his brain a little bit today and see what we can learn about driving the golf ball from Tim. So Tim, you hit it pretty darn far. You're a good athlete. Talk to me first about do you have any key thoughts that you think of? Maybe is there a setup that you do differently with the driver? Just give people a general overview of what you're thinking about or what you're trying to do when you're driving the golf ball.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for having me. First, usually it definitely starts with the setup. The driver is obviously a little bit different setup than the rest of your bag. The reason for that is it's the one club in your bag. You're actually trying to hit the ball on the upslope, on the upswing. So I like to put the ball position up in my stance, usually off my left instep.
Mm-hmm.
I put the ball up in my stance. That kind of promotes hitting a little bit more on the upswing. Also, I like to usually try and drop my right shoulder down a little bit lower than my left shoulder. One of the issues I had in the past was I'd always have kind of a too low of a launch angle. And as soon as I started to drop my right shoulder a little bit more at address, it kind of helped promote a little bit higher launch and get a little bit less spin on the ball as opposed to hitting down on the ball a little bit and having too much spin on all my drives.
So you talked about launch angle. Can you explain launch angle to people a little bit more? Like, what is there a certain window they want to hit it through when they're driving the golf ball?
Yeah, so usually the ideal launch for most players, most tour players are usually launching the ball anywhere from 9 degrees up to, I've seen as high as 14 degrees of launch. Some of these young guys like Rory and Bubba Watson, they tee the ball real high and they're hitting the ball on a huge upswing. So they're launching the ball sometimes up 12, 13 degrees versus you see some amateurs, sometimes they have too low of a launch angle. Part of the reason for that, Jeff, I think is that most people got in their heads over the years that having a low degree driver, like a 7-degree driver, just because they think it has lower loft on it, that they can hit it further because they have lower loft. What they don't realize is that sometimes having a little bit more loft on their driver will actually get them even more distance. The analogy I always thought about when thinking of this concept was if you take a garden hose and you spray the garden hose at a certain angle. So if you're spraying it real low and your garden hose is just going real low, you might be able to shoot the water further by just tilting the angle of the garden hose a little higher, and the water will actually travel further. It's the same concept with a golf ball. There's an ideal launch angle. Obviously, as it gets combined with the spin, your spin of the golf ball, but that's kind of the concept that I use for that.
Talk a little bit more about spin. I know most people don't understand actually how spin affects hitting the golf ball far. Correct.
So a lot of the amateurs that I've fit over the years, and I've seen at demo days, countless demo days over the years, whether it's with one of the companies that comes to Cragburn or wherever the company's going, people their angle of attack on the golf ball is usually a little too steep especially with the driver, and they're getting their spin rates are up 14, 15. Their spin rates are up around 4,000, 5,000 spin rate. And I've even seen as high as 6, 7, 8,000 spin rate with drivers. And the spin rate is usually these guys on tour that are trying to launch the ball high with low spin, their spin rates can be anywhere from, 1,600 to 2,500 max on their spin rate. So the whole key is to trying to find these fittings that these tour pros go through. They're trying to find the perfect combination of spin rate and launch angle. And once you can find that perfect combination of spin rate and launch angle, then they can kind of optimize their length and their ball flight.
All right. So, and what happens when the ball's spinning, basically the wind's eating that ball up and causing that ball to drop out of the air quicker, correct?
Correct. So especially if you're into a headwind and you got too much spin on the ball, it could take 30, 40, 50 yards off your drive if you have too much backspin on the ball. And also you get the side spin if you have any side spin, it's going to accentuate the side spin. And all of a sudden your 10-yard slice is turning into a 30, 40-yard slice because your ball's spinning with the wind.
So Tim, how does equipment affect that? So in your case, you're a high-speed player, right? So a player like you is going to use a heavier, stiffer shaft, right?
Correct. So usually to kind of level off your spin, I've always been, like I said earlier, I've always been a high spin player. As soon as I started kind of experimenting and getting fit for different shafts, I switched from maybe about 10 years ago. I switched from a stiff shaft to an extra stiff shaft. And I went up to a little bit heavier shaft. I used to play like 65-gram stiff shafts. Currently, I'm up to about usually around 75-gram extra stiff now. And another thing I've been doing recently that actually really helped with my accuracy is I tip the bottom of my shaft when I order it. So what that is, as you know, Jeff, is the bottom of your golf shaft. The company you order it from can take, I usually get mine tipped a half an inch. Some guys go all the way up to about an inch. You tip, they cut the bottom of the shaft. So there's not as much kick and whip on the bottom. So it kind of stiffens up the bottom of the shaft. And ever since I started tipping my shafts, it's definitely helped with accuracy. The one thing I will say about that, though, is that most amateurs need to be careful with tipping their shafts and getting too stiff of a shaft, because if you don't have enough whip at the bottom of your shaft, you'll definitely lose some distance that way too. So your best bet is to definitely get fit by a PGA professional or an expert club fitter, and they can tell you which shaft combination would be best for you.
Yeah, I used to be that guy, extra stiff tip. I never tipped them, but extra stiff. Now I'm about 65 grams in stiff. And people, like you said earlier in the conversation, people seem to be enamored with the loft on the bottom of their club. I always said it's immaterial. If you're hitting a TaylorMade driver that's 8.5 degrees and you've got a tip shaft and this and extra stiff, and I've got 8.5 degrees and it's 8 and it's a Titleist and I've got it cranked to deep, whatever it is, it's a completely different loft number. So I always said the loft on the bottom of the club is immaterial. Have you noticed that people tend to want to grab, especially guys, they want to grab, I'm going to hit this million balls, I'm going to hit it out there with Faulkner, and they're going to grab that. What other tips can you give an amateur when they're buying a driver? We're in the field, we're getting fit by the best fitters in the world. And what other tips would you give an amateur buying a driver?
Well, first, I'd definitely go back to kind of what I hit on is that in today's game, to optimize your driving and your distance, it's definitely crucial. Even if you're a little bit higher handicap, say you're an 18 handicap, it's crucial for you to try and get a fitting is the first step. To go to these people at different fitting stations or go to a demo day at your local club. There's even public places like a couple of the golf domes have demo days. So if you don't have a club where you go and get to demo day, go to the golf dome and they can fit you and kind of optimize you into the right shaft. But usually your shaft that you select is kind of it's kind of based off of your swing speed, right? So most people that are swinging under 100 miles per hour with their driver, you might be a little bit close, say you're high 90s, you might be a little bit closer to like a softer stiff shaft. Or if you're into the 80s, say you're a senior player and you're in the 80s for your swing speed with your driver, you'd be better off trying something like a little bit firmer regular shaft, something like that, instead of just automatically thinking, well, my buddies all have stiff and I think I swing as fast as my buddies, so I got to try stiff or an extra stiff shaft. You got to kind of get rid of that mentality and base it off of the numbers of your swing versus, I guess you could say, Jeff, I guess you don't want to base it off of, your ego of what you think you should be hitting. Let the numbers dictate what driver you're going to go with. Most people that swing over, let's say 108 miles per hour with their driver, you're going to usually lean towards almost an extra stiff shaft if you're over 108, 110 miles per hour. and then you get into, it's obviously you don't have to think about this too much with amateur golf, but the game is evolving so much, and people like Bryson, who's obviously Bryson's currently an anomaly, but you get people like Bryson's swinging the club at 127, 132 miles per hour, which just to you and I just sounds outrageous because we know how hard that is. Even to swing it at 115, how hard you need to swing that club.
Right. Are you trying to swing hard, Tim? When you're up over the golf ball, you're at number 10 at Crag, whatever hole you're on. You need to rope one. What do you have any different thoughts than a typical drive? If you need to add, you're trying to reach a par 5 and 2 or something, or you feel like your distance will benefit you on that hole. Do you have any different thoughts, or do you go through the same routine and hit the same shot?
Well, I guess it's all circumstantial, obviously, as to what kind of hole you're playing. Sometimes where you're at in your round, if you're a bunch over them, you can kind of gamble a little bit more. If you're kind of protecting, your score and you're playing pretty well, you may want to dial it back a little. The main thought I have though, is I get real quick in my takeaway when I'm trying to hit it too fast and too hard, and trying to pick up speed. So one of my main thoughts that I have is to still try and have a smooth takeaway and a smooth full turn on the backswing. And then if I'm really trying to add a couple yards, I try and go after it a little bit more in the downswing. One issue I kind of have with that though is if I get too fast, my whole body will kind of get ahead of the ball, and then you get into a whole bunch of problems if you get your body ahead of the ball. So I usually try and just have a little bit smoother backswing, and then when I'm coming down a little bit harder, I really try and post up behind the ball more.
And so first tee jitters, I imagine you still get first tee jitters. You're playing in the last group on the second day of one of our major events, which you've done. And what do you do to get over those first tee jitters? You're hitting a driver. It's one of the hardest clubs to hit in the, well, it's not the hardest club to hit in the bag, but people perceive that. I always thought the driver was good because it was always on a flat lie. It was always on a tee. You always had the same conditions every time you were hitting it. But, you get to that first tee in any situation and people tend to be nervous. Do you have any different thoughts then?
Well, I think the main thing that's helped with me and with stuff like that, and over the years, I feel like I've gotten more competitive in the tournaments because of what I'm about to tell you. Is I've kind of tried to go to a specific routine, even if it's the first tee of a pro-am or if it's the final group of our section championship. I try and stick to a routine. So if I'm on the first tee of the section championship of the second day, I want to go through my full routine. I tee up the ball, take my practice swing, try and do it the same way I would as if I was going out, maybe not as focused if I was going to play with my buddies, but really try and go through the same routine as if I was going with my buddies. And what that does, it kind of gets you into the process, going through the process instead of worrying about the results of the shot. And you know what, Jeff? I think one of the reasons amateurs struggle a lot off of the first tee is because they're worried about the result of their shot. Usually, in most clubs, this is the what's happening is there's usually a crowd at the first tee, right? So it might be their only shot the whole day where they have an audience. So instead of thinking about the process of their pre-shot routine and making a good swing on the ball, right? Or I should say, picking out a target and going through the process, picking out a target, they're worried about who's watching them and what the result of their shot is going to be. So they're kind of worried about the audience around them. And so that's why you see in a lot of amateurs, especially public golf, a lot of amateurs get so nervous because they're worried about the result of people seeing what's going to happen to their shot. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I agree. It is. I'm big on routine, and I've had some pretty nervous tee shots on the first tee, and I pretty much would do the same thing. And I try to take the tension out of my body and try to maybe make a more rhythmic swing and focus on centeredness of contact. All I want to do is hit it right in the center, and whatever happens, happens, right? You got to play the next shot anyway, so you hit the best shot you can. So Tim, what about practicing? When you're on the range and you're preparing or you're practicing with your driver, do you have any drills? Do you do drills for speed? Are there different things you'll do on the range if you're just having a range session trying to work out with your driver a little bit? Can you explain to me what you might do on the range tee when you're practicing with that club?
Yeah, so As we all know, I should be practicing putting even more than I do. But when I am hitting full shots on the range, I usually like to try, like when we're at the range at Crag, there's a set of flags up the left side of the range. There's also a set of flags kind of up the right side of the range. So I almost like to envision like that's the fairway between the flags and kind of turn it almost into a golf hole where I need to try and hit the fairway with my drive. Because if you just start teeing up, and I've seen this a lot of times from a lot of different people where they'll just start teeing up driver after driver after driver, and they're not even going through any kind of swing thought. They're just trying to get it out there as far as they can. You see a lot of this at local, especially at local public driving ranges. Guys are just trying to tee it up and rip it as far as they can. And you're not going to get any better that way because you're not really thinking about any kind of swing thought or any, you're just trying to hit it as far as you can. And granted, it is good to try and create more speed, but if you don't even have any kind of thought process whatsoever, it's hard to kind of rein that in. But when I'm practicing, like I said, I'll try and picture a fairway. I'll also do a couple little drills where I'll kind of hit a couple shots with sometimes a closed stance or a more open stance. Usually I'll try and hit balls with a little bit more open stance personally, just because my tendency is to get too closed. I start aiming a little bit too far to the right with my shoulders and my feet, my hip line. So I'll aim too far right. And over time, all of a sudden, if I'm not working on my alignment, all of a sudden I'm aiming 20, 30 yards right, and I don't even know it. So sometimes I'll get another look from another PGA Pro that maybe one of the other guys at Cragburn will be looking at my swing and they'll say, "Hey, Tim, you're aiming 20 yards right." So one thing that really helps with that, and I'm sure a lot of people use them, are trying to use alignment rods. So especially with my driver, I like to lay down a couple alignment rods just to make sure that my lines are lined up and I'm not aiming like my tendency is to aim too far right.
And do you do any drills to create speed? Or, I mean, you've always had a lot of speed, so I don't know that you ever need to create more, but do you still work on trying to create speed?
Well, it's funny you say that. Ever since kind of last year and I know we're clearly not tour players. I mean, we're PGA pros and we play local league. So we're definitely not tour players, but just watching what Bryson has done. I have in the last year, I purchased those speed sticks, just trying to get a little bit more speed and a little bit more whip on the bottom of my swing. And I've been trying to get some more speed just through using the speed sticks. So it has been something I've been thinking about. It is tough for me though, just because I have such a fast transition in my golf swing. When I really try and rip at it, it's tougher for me to keep the accuracy that I like. I'd rather be in the fairway 280, 290 than really try and rip one 310, 315 if you really rip it and then you don't really know where it's going, unfortunately. So that's something I need to work on.
And did those speed sticks help you increase your speed, or did you find any value in those?
Oh, I think they're unbelievable. One of our fine players, our club champion, he's a fine local player. He actually lives in Ohio now, Tony Hania, which I'm sure you know Tony. Yeah. Tony kind of told me about this. He started using the speed sticks, and Tony's in his early 50s, and he picked up 6-8 miles per hour with his driver just by training with those speed sticks all the time. So ever since he told me that, I started to use them, and it really, I picked up 2 or 3 miles per hour just from using the speed stick. So it's definitely, I'm sure there's multiple training aids that you could use to pick up speed. But one thing, Jeff, I know you and the guys on Tee to Green have always talked about is it's a lot easier to get speed when you're a junior golfer. You start young. One thing I've always had to my advantage is I played hockey my whole life, and I've always had real kind of a quick tempo and a quick swing speed ever since I was a junior golfer. If you start swinging a little bit harder when you're a junior golfer, it's a lot easier to hit it a little bit further when you're an adult versus swinging real slow your whole life and then trying to pick up speed when you're an adult. It's not an easy thing to do. So that's one of the main things. it kind of drives me nuts when I'll be teaching someone, say at the golf dome or something, and the guy, a parent is telling their kid to like slow your swing down and watch your tempo. And I want to say that's not really the right thing to be teaching when they're that young. Especially in today's game, I like to see you try and really pick up the swing speed when you're a junior golfer and really try and create some speed at the bottom of your swing.
Yeah, you can learn to hit it straight later, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's not like me, 52 years old. I used to have quite a bit of speed, if you remember, a long time ago. So I may have to go get some of those speed sticks. Huh, Faulkner? Maybe I'll pick up a couple yards and help my game out. All right, Tim, if anybody wants to reach you for a lesson, this has been excellent, by the way. You know, it's nice to talk to PGA pros who know a lot about their topic. If anybody wants to reach you to learn more about driving, I think I'm going to have to come out and have you take a look at my my driver swing this spring. How do they get a hold of you, Tim?
Yeah, so you could call me anytime at Cragburn. Our number there is 655-0000. We do allow outside lessons at Cragburn. Usually the prime times of like the weekends and stuff we reserve for the members. But if we do have time in the kind of the off times, usually before 10 or after 4 or 5 in the evening, we do give some lessons to outside people as long as you set up an appointment in advance. But my recommendation is if you're struggling with your driver, don't let your buddy who thinks he knows exactly what he's talking about give you his swing tip he saw on YouTube. You go see a PGA professional, no matter where we are, public, anywhere. Go see a PGA professional, and they can kind of guide you in the right direction on how you can pick up speed. Or go see a PGA professional to get a fitting, and they can really try and get your numbers, like we talked about earlier here in the cast, of trying to get your spin and your launch kind of more synced together like they do on tour.
Great. Well, thanks for your time today, Tim. Everybody, we've been listening to the Tee to Green podcast brought to you by Custom Turf. And we appreciate PGA professional Tim Faulkner helping us get a little bit better driving the golf ball. Thanks, Tim. And I'm definitely going to I'll be talking to you. I'll be heading out to Cragburn first chance I get this spring.
Jeff, thanks for having me.
All right. I'll talk to you.
Take care.